Let's get chilly. Yeah, welcome back to Let's Chill, the official, unofficial Minnesota Wind Chill and Minnesota Strike podcast. I'm Jeff.
I'm Jay.
And I'm Kane.
We're always trying something new here at Let's Chill. Jay, why don't you kick us off with some recaps here? We got some recaps from the strike and the wind chill.
Yeah, so we're gonna start with the strike. The strike had an amazing game last Sunday against the Nashville NightShade. It was a very windy game. I mean, you could see their jerseys, their kits, the flags just flapping in the wind all game long. Some discs, it looked like they were not obeying the laws of physics. They kept going up, like after the fact, like they wouldn't catch them and they bring them up. Um, I remember texting in our group chat initially about that game. Sorry, the strike came away with a big win, 16-5. So that's important, to get this recap properly. I remember texting early on during the game though that it looked like neither team was playing like there was wind, but in a bad way. They weren't adjusting to the wind. They were trying to throw it like there wasn't any wind. Um, and that was sort of like evident by the fact that it was 4-2 like midway through the second quarter. The strike were not scoring a ton. Then Nightshade didn't ever score a ton, but like the strike did, and it wasn't during that first half really, at least the first 3 quarters of that first half. And then something clicked, and it's like the strike figured out how to bend the wind to their nature, and it was beautiful. It was the strike team that we've been talking about all year long, the hype that we'd been building up for them. Every player was clicking. I remember, hearing everybody's name being mentioned. It wasn't like I was hearing one or two names. Steph Rupp was making huge impacts. Luis Beck was making huge impacts. Um, Steph Wood was making big impacts. I could basically go on the entirety of the roster. Um, I do want to say though, uh, Jeff Allegra Johnson McKee had a very big role in winning this game. So
Really? Tell
yes,
me more, please. Enlighten
Allegra
us.
Johnson McKee. So Jeff has been really hype on her all year. And in this game, I swear she played like wind didn't exist in the best way possible. Anytime the disc was in her hand, I don't know if she had. I'm sure if you like look back at her completions, I don't know if she had any drops. I didn't like go through and analyze stats.
Mhm.
I felt like she didn't have a single drop or a single throwaway. Like she was 100% on completions. The disc moved through her very well, and I was watching her, as we were supposed to.
Yes.
Um, and yeah, it was very exciting to see. Jeff was right. He was super vindicated to have that player, actually do really well. But again, like I said, it seemed like all the strike players like they finally clicked. So it's sad that that's sort of how their season ends on that really. I mean, it's happy that it ends on a high note, but it's sad that like, that's the end of the season because I think this team, if this was the team playing since day one, if this quality of the team playing since day one, they easily could have gone, maybe not 5-0, but 4-0, 4-1.
Mhm.
They were not a 2-3 team.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what we said last week too, more or less. That this game really could potentially set them up really strong for next year, and that this whole season was not emblematic of how good this team is. I mean, at some point we do have to say, I know we're trying to be optimistic, like they still were 2-3, like not to be negative, but like they did still lose, 3 out of their 5 games. However, they still were not a bad team. That doesn't mean they're a bad team. And this game especially shows like there's a lot of hope for next season. And hopefully this long off season, like the season is so short and the off season is so long. But hopefully they don't lose a lot of that momentum. Hopefully they keep that chemistry. Hopefully they keep those, those key players, that feeling of how it clicked in the wind, those comeback wins, or even those close losses. Like there's something to learn from every single game, and I hope that they maintain a lot of that in the off season.
Yeah, I know we've harped on it maybe too much, but the season's way too short. I think this game was, and I don't know if you guys saw it, the Philadelphia Surge beat New York Gridlock. They handed the New York Gridlock their first loss in
No,
2 years.
it wasn't the Surge, it was the Red.
Oh, yeah, the red. Sorry, sorry, sorry. It was a
Because
team that we, it was a team that we had taken a good game against.
yeah,
It was,
and
sorry, I'm
Red is going to championship weekend now because of
yes.
that. And they beat the
Yeah, I
Surge
think
as
they beat
well.
the
So
Surge. Yeah, sorry, that was what I meant
yeah.
to say. They beat the Surge as well the
Yep.
same weekend in a doubleheader weekend.
Yeah, it was
And I think to
crazy. Crazy
me, that
weekend.
really shows that that kind of is, taking stepping away from the strike for a second and looking at the league as a whole, that shows that we need more games. Because what does it look like when we rematch Indy now? What does it look like
Right.
when we rematch New York?
Or
And I'm
when
not saying that.
Red and Surge rematch even, like
Right,
those games,
right.
those are
Very
close games and
close.
like yeah, so
Exactly. And so I think what the strike did really, really well this game, like you said, Jay, was making those adjustments. Um, and I think at this point in the season, they are a team that can do that. And it just almost came too late. And
mhm.
it feels a little disappointing because it's like, it feels like now we're just getting started, but the season's over. And so it was a really, really good game. Like you said, it felt like the team was really connecting on all the things we've been like praising all year, and all the stuff that we were kind of commenting on, like for keys, like players to watch, keys of the game. It's like everything was on point. So it was a great game. We almost held them to 1 point a quarter. That would have been.
Yeah, that would have been crazy. Really an
It
average of
was it was really close.
which is kind
Wasn't it
of
about a buzzer beater too? Like, if I'm not mistaken, or like a end of quarter possession or
Yeah, I think it
something.
was an end of third quarter
Yeah,
possession.
yeah.
which is a kind of a bummer too. Like because yeah, as fun as it is as a strike fan, like that's a bummer to see that kind of disparity. And like as an ultimate fan, as for someone who might be a Nightshade fan, like that's kind of a bummer. So hopefully, like Nightshade can bounce back. I'm not trying to be like, oh, we're all winners here. Like that's not the case, but um, still, it's like you want some competitive games, and we all
Mhm.
know what it feels like to be on those losing teams. We know what it's like when we play the Detroit Mechanics, and it's like, yeah, it's a given. So hopefully Nightshade and some of these other teams can bounce back, including Strike. I mean, I don't think Strike was ever oh this game is a given as we've talked about, but yeah, you want some like, good competition, and the Strike saw that 4 out of 5 games this year. So that's what you want to see.
And I would say the Nightshade weren't playing bad. They just didn't make those adjustments to the wind. And
Right.
I don't want to say they never made those adjustments to the wind. Sometimes the wind does crazy things. Like I said, discs were getting caught and floating up in the air, and you can't predict that that happens. That happened to the strike even. That's not to say the strike played the wind perfectly either, but they definitely played the wind significantly better. They made those adjustments, like Kana mentioned. So, and I think that the Nightshade, are a good team, but just could not figure out that wind, could not adjust to that wind as well as the strike did, and that's what the strike came away with.
Mhm.
They were getting good reads on blocks too. I think that's the bigger thing for me is that the strike had
Strike had
amazing reads
really
on
good
discs.
defense.
Yeah.
Really good defense.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't. Yeah,
Which
we didn't mention that yet.
I was say
Right.
it was really their offense most of the season that's been carrying them. So that's good to
Right.
see.
Hmm.
Right.
I'm not gonna I'm mostly gonna preview mailbag really quick. One of our first questions on mailbag is what do the strike need to do? What's one thing that they need to do next year just to improve in general? I think is how I phrase it. Um, so my what I'm saying is we're gonna pause on this conversation because we're gonna come back to it at the end. So I
Mhm.
want to keep talking about the strike, but let's move on to the wind chill here. Let's recap the wind chill's game against the Thunderbirds, Jay.
Yeah, so the Winchell's game against the Thunderbirds wasn't one that I'm particularly thrilled about.
Yeah.
It was a win. It was a 4-point win, 5-point win. I don't have the final score pulled up right.
20 to 16, I believe.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was 20 to 16 or 21. But yeah, so a 4-point win. But the last time they played the Thunderbirds, they absolutely handed them the game. And my keys to the game last week were sort of kind of joking at the expense of the Thunderbirds, but also sort of serious, where it's Pittsburgh, don't do anything too flashy, maybe play in some of your backups. And while they were playing, a couple of rookies, a couple of people who haven't had much field time, they were also playing their all-stars. And that might
Yeah.
have been, trying to get them a few more reps before they head off to U24 or, trying to get them a few more reps before they play Madison this weekend. But I think the bigger thing for me is when you're playing your all-stars and Pittsburgh is making comebacks off of your not off of them playing well, off of your mistakes, that's an issue. So it was a win. It was a solid 4 point win, but it easily could have been an 8 point win or a 9 point win. There were quite a few throwaways and turnovers that Minnesota had, and it just looked like coordination and like full field awareness wasn't super present for the wind chill in that game.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I just my really only contribution to this point is I talked to Kane about this as we were heading out of the stadium. I was by myself at the time when I noticed this. It was late in the game. I think it was fourth quarter when Kane had went up and sat in the stands. I at one point just was like very deliberate in watching the Windchill's offense and just like how they're setting up. Are they running their typical, vert stack or what are they doing? And and at least to my eye, and I don't have a trained ultimate eye, so maybe they were running a designated offense, but it really looked like they were, like you said, Jay, uncoordinated. Like I couldn't quite pick up a pattern of who's cutting where, and like there were people on the break side, there were people on the force side. Like they weren't. I don't think they were. It wasn't a flat mark. They weren't, forcing middle or anything. Like I guess again, I don't really remember. It was really fast paced. I was hoping I was with Kane at the time so I could point that out, but I was just by myself. And yeah, it just like it wasn't an ugly point. It wasn't a bad point. I think they still got the goal, but I was just like, what is the strategy here? I was very confused. And like they had time to set up. So it wasn't again like it was right off the pole and they're still setting up. Like this was in the middle of the point.
Yeah, it was really weird trying to like piece together what the intention was on any given point. And I'm talking when the Winch was on defense too. I remember like a few plays where like the a disc would go up and Braxton and I would look at each other and kind of chuckle like, "Oh, Pittsburgh's going deep again," because they had like two hucks that actually completed. But also a lot of the time Pittsburgh just missed on the hucks and Minnesota did not get the block. Well, like I like the defender was doing some crazy move. I don't know. Like it felt like Minnesota was very disjointed. I was kind of talking to you during this game, Jeff. It was like I was kind of bored, to be honest. Like there were a lot
Yeah.
of ways. There were a lot of poor decision making moments, a lot of like low effort moments. It felt like, and maybe because it was against Pittsburgh, they kind of just like didn't take it seriously. But you
But that
kind of
doesn't
have
seem like the wind
that's
chill, like I don't
that's
think that
not like
was
that didn't feel
yeah.
good. That didn't feel like a good game. But
And we're not gonna talk about the 4-on-1 sky that went the Thunderbirds
yeah, I
way.
wasn't gonna say it, but we gotta bring that up.
Okay, but have you actually gone back and watched that play? That
No.
wasn't even a wind chill. That was actually just a really good
It
Thunderbirds.
was it
Like
was a
it
really
was
good
in a
play.
Great
like
grab.
he
Yeah.
straight up he got over all of them. He got his hand on the
Yeah.
disc first. Like it was that was a really good play. Like
Yeah.
It
and
was statistically speaking, we should have had that. I don't care.
yeah, yeah.
Screw that.
But watching
But
like plays like that back, it was a 5 point win. It was 21-16.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, watching plays like
yeah,
that back, I think to myself, Minnesota, if Pittsburgh makes fewer mistakes, Minnesota loses this game.
exactly. And like I don't want that one back. I want the ones back where, they beat us by 3 steps because we're dilly-dallying and giving them the under
Hmm.
and then allowing them the field space. And I don't know. And I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to like harp on the wind chill. Obviously, these are professional first players. They know what they're doing. They're good at the game. But
And it's
it did feel like this game they were not as locked in as they should have been if they want to make another championship appearance.
ultimately it's still a W in the column. It's a tally mark in the W column, but yeah, I know what you mean. They got to clean it up a little bit, and we could chalk up to a lot of things. It was maybe number 25. Maybe that's what it was.
Right. Yeah. It was
Number
a bad
20. Yeah. Number 25, for those who may not have been aware, was Tristan Van de Mortel. It took us a minute. It took us about maybe halfway through the first quarter, and Kane goes, "Wait, that kind of looks like Tristan Van de Mortel." We're like, "Oh, it is." So I don't know. I should have gotten a quote from him about where the heck his jersey was, but we're like, "Oh, Petrovic must be back," or Mathieu. Sorry, not Matej.
uh, yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
a good
Anything else?
summary of that game. But
yeah.
what can they do to improve this upcoming Friday against Madison Radicals?
Da-da-da. It's their first matchup against the Radicals, and they are in Madison on Friday. It's Friday Night Frisbee. Um,
Sir.
it's a
Check it
big
out
game.
on YouTube.
Yeah. Or if you can make the trip, get down to Madison. My schedule has never, like for the last 3 years, I'm like, I'm gonna go this year, and then it always lines up on a weekend or a Friday that I can't go. It's like that sucks. But
Championship weekend this year, though, baby.
championship weekend. I got PTO off for that, so like I'm
I'm
confirmed
there.
going. So
I'm there.
anyway,
Anyway,
Kane, do you want to do yours first? Or you want me to do my first?
I think it'll be maybe easier to transition from keys to players, or what do you think?
Yeah, yeah, I'll kick off with keys to the game. Okay, let me pull mine up here. So my first key to the game is I don't know, play the quarters. I'm gonna share my screen really quick. It's just a quick chart that I have. Um, Basically, I like kind of going quarter by quarter and seeing like when are teams scoring the most, and like what are their strongest quarters. And yes, sometimes it is random, and sometimes it's not. So in this chart here, you'll see the Radicals trend is their first half is very strong. They score the majority of their points by far in the first two quarters. And then in the last two quarters, on average, they score like 10 fewer points per quarter, which is crazy. That's a like so third or fourth quarter, second half for the Radicals, they just peter out. For whatever reason, they don't have it. The wind chill stayed very steady throughout the whole game. Third quarter, for whatever reason, again, maybe this could be random, maybe it's not, but the third quarter is the weakest quarter for the wind chill. And the fourth quarter, interestingly enough, is the strongest. They've scored their most points in the fourth quarter, but not by much. In the first half, it's 28 and 29 points. In quarter four, it's 30 points. So they only score one more point. They've only scored one more point in the fourth quarter. And really quick, I'll say quarter four, there's this asterisk here. In the Radicals game, they played Houston. The game did end early due to weather. I saw in the column the fourth quarter was 0-0, and I was like, whoa, that must have been a boring fourth quarter. And I was like, wait, no. And I looked back, yeah, it ended in the third quarter. So I averaged the other fourth quarter score, so it was 3.5. So I just added that um, to that. So my key to the game ultimately is play each quarter, don't let up, and like push through. Um, we saw that fourth quarter collapse against Chicago last week from Madison. Madison and Chicago are going like bang, 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 and that chart it shows very well. Like Madison just kind of goes downhill once the fourth quarter hits, and the wind chill need to capitalize on that.
Yeah, I think consistency on offense is kind of like a sub key to this game. And I'll bring that up later with one of my keys with one of my players.
Mhm.
I think as opposed to a game against Pittsburgh or Indy, Madison I think is going to bring it a little bit more. Sorry, Waldo just jumped up on the desk. Uh, that's funny. I think Madison's going to bring it a little bit more, and so we may be seeing a few more O points. And if that is the case, then I think that going into the fourth quarter, that offensive line has to be able to continuously, break that defense and force Madison to score fewer points than us.
I I totally agree with that, Kane. But I think even more important than that is if Madison truly does score less in the second half, like if that is like statistics, then Minnesota like Jeff was saying, like needs to play those quarters better.
Mhm.
Like you win the game by winning more quarters or by winning quarters by more, scoring more points.
Yes.
But if your opponents are gonna score fewer points in the second half, then it's like paramount that you stay with them in the first half.
They're giving you the second half more or less.
Yes.
Like
So stay with them in the first half. So that if it's really, it's not really quarters, it's halves, but if you stay with them in the first half and they're weaker in the second half, then as far as I'm concerned, that's your game plan.
yeah, agreed. And I made a note too. I'm not going to share my screen again, but the second quarter for each team is it's the strongest quarter for the Radicals and the second strongest quarter for the Wind Chill, which again may or may not mean anything, but just like I don't know, be on the lookout for the quarter two, like what's going to happen. That might be a pretty paramount time where the Wind Chill really do need to have their groove under them and play keep up with the team. My second key to the game is throw, throw, throw. The Madison Radicals have the third lowest completion percentage in the league this year. Notably, the Winchell have the fifth lowest, so they're not much better. Um, but I'm just gonna throw some numbers at you, and I'm gonna try to dissect them. I'm not gonna try to overstimulate you guys with numbers. But the Winchell, we've talked about this in the past on the podcast, do a really, really good job at forcing their opponents to throw a lot of throws. So overall, this entire season so far, Winchell's opponents have thrown a total of 1,672 total throws. That's not completions, that's total throws. 1,600. Winchell have thrown 1,054. So 600 fewer throws total in the season. Um, and the completion percentage, the total completions are about the same. It's about a 600 completion difference. Point being, the Winchell, like I said, do a really good job. Their defense does a really good job at forcing throws, forcing errors on those throws. And again, I think that can really go tie into the last key to the game is tiring the Radicals offense and defense out. Um, Making them throw, making them run, making them work for it. So in that second half, they're tired out. They don't have a lot more gas in them because they're working way harder than they have in the past.
This sort of that makes a lot of sense. I totally agree with that. And this sort of brings me back to last year's Central Division Championship game. It was really
Yes.
close during that first half. I remember we were on the fence actually with some
Yes.
Madison fans. They were some cool guys.
Yep.
Shout
Yep.
out
Yep.
those Madison fans. Um, and like in that second half, Minnesota, broke away from Madison. And I don't love singling out individual players who I think are weaknesses, but I feel like it needs to be said that Kai Marcus, he is a double-edged sword. When
Yep.
he is on in that first half, when his players are getting those discs, and if they are in a lead situation, he is lethal. But the second he's feeling pressure, like he needs to come back, I mean, respect, for taking those 50-50 shots to try to get your team back in the game. But if you can get those 50-50s to go your way, if you can force a lot of throws, and then, Kai Marcus feels sort of trapped, he's going to take that deep look if he's been doing a lot of resets. That's Kai Marcus's MO. He does it all the time. So I totally agree. Like that's sort of what Minnesota did last year in the Central Division Championship game. Forced a lot of throws, and eventually they took a bad look.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think. Can I transition that into my players to watch? Because I
Oh,
think
please. Yep.
okay,
Yep. Please.
one of the key players for this counterattack for on Minnesota's offense is going to be Gordon Larson, and I want to draw a comparison between two players. Gordon Larson. I apologize about that. Gordon Larson and Anthony Gutowski. I don't know if you guys follow him or like know about him in the
Oh
realm.
yeah. Oh
He
yeah.
is the deep space cutter, right? However, this year he's really elevated his game. He's hitting a lot more unders. He's taking a lot more defensive points played. He's playing a lot more rounded ultimate, and I think that you can
This is
compare that to someone
Gutowski or Larson.
Anthony Gutowski.
Okay.
So specifically, he compared to last year, he is coming from a only deep space cutter to being a much more well-rounded offensive player who can
Mhm.
also flex a little more. I think that is a great comparison to Gordon Larson, who I think last year had that same evolution. I think last year we kind of pointed to him as a player who stepped up. Championship weekend, he had an all-star performance. If we're being honest, he had an MVP performance at championship weekend. He's doing all the things that Gutowski's doing this year. I think they're probably not going to be matched up 1-to-1 against each other, but I do think that Minnesota is going to be looking for people like Gordon Larson to be spark plugging the offense, hitting those quick continuations, and outscoring Madison when we have to outscore them. Because, like you said, Madison loves to take those shots, and sometimes Minnesota has to fire back. And I think Gordon Larson's going to be the guy to get that.
Just really quickly checking on his offensive versus defensive points played this season.
Larson
So
or
he,
Gutowski?
Larson, he's played 73 offensive points and only 8 defensive points. So yeah, like that's gonna be a fun one. Like you said, Ken, they probably won't be matched up necessarily. They very well could be, depending on how the breaks go and stuff. But um, just seeing who will be matched up on both of them, who will be matched up on Gordon and who's gonna be taking care of Gutowski. We're kind of doing a player to watch almost for the Radicals as well.
Yeah.
But Gutowski has been pretty sweet to watch. Yeah, I love that shout out.
I will
Yeah,
be
they
honest, my original shout out was going to be Quinn Snyder
Yeah,
for hitting the deep space more, but so
he's not
subplay.
rostered this week. Yeah,
I will say I think Gutowski is one of the best cutters in the league. They call him Gumby for a reason. Things things stick to his hands. I swear he's got to wash his hands because
Yeah,
things
right.
stick to them unnaturally. Um, but I agree. I think Gordon Larson needs to put up a Gutowski-esque performance. I think if Gutowski has better stats at the end of the game than Larson does, I think that could be a very clear indicator that Madison is winning. Watching them head to head, quarter to quarter could be, if you show me their stats at the end of the game, I could tell you who win based on who did better, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that, and I'll leave it on this. I think Larson has had a relatively quiet season. I think he's only scored once, if I'm not mistaken. I don't have his stats pulled up right now. I did earlier.
I can pull it up real
Um,
quick. He has
but he's
3 goals, 1 block,
he has one
13
block. There's one
assists.
block. Okay.
Yeah.
He's had a little bit of a quieter season, maybe in terms of scoring goals. I mean, he's thrown more assists relative to last
Mhm.
season. So I would like to see him just catch a few more, maybe in the deep space, maybe extend the field a little more downfield, and kind of force Minnesota's attack to hit those downfield spaces more. Okay, on the flip side, on a defensive player to watch, because I always got to shout out my defensive boys. I'm actually going to shout out my home dog number 13, the big juicy Colin Berry. Uh,
Nice.
he has had, wow, what a season he's playing.
Mhm.
Um, Aside from just the all-star or the highlight reel plays he's made, and he's made quite a few now. He's had quite a few really good blocks. His ability to deny cutters in the deep space, I think, is incredibly underrated and will be super, super useful in this matchup against Madison. Because, like you were saying, Jay, they love to push the field, they love to take that deep space. Um, we mentioned Gutowski. I wouldn't be surprised if we had a Colin Berry Gutowski matchup. I think that sounds very likely. And Barry seems like the kind of person who can match the energy, but who can take it one step further with the field awareness and the general just like experience as Barry has been on the field for many, many years compared to Gutowski's only 2 in the league. So Colin Barry's my second shout out player to watch.
I
Yeah.
think I think you're spot on with that matchup of him versus Gutowski. Um, I want to point out, I mentioned this in when Minnesota played Atlanta. Barry was put on Holzmeyer. He and Hanscom shared the duty, but Barry was on Holzmeyer for a lot of the game. And Holzmeyer finished with a plus minus of -1 in that game. So Barry did a really good job shutting him down. Barry had, I believe, 1 block that game. Yeah,
Hmm.
1 block that game.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. He's,
Space
he's has
denial.
he has 2 blocks this season. He's not putting up crazy numbers, but the fact that he had 1 block and Holzmeyer ended with a -1 should tell you everything you need to know about how good he did in that matchup, how locked down his defense is. So I think you're right about he's going to be going up against Gutowski, and he's going to be making Gutowski make big plays, and he's going to be denying those opportunities.
Can point to like the same stat that basically I really wish that we had a defensive pressure stat somehow to measure that, because that's a perfect example of how his stats don't show his contributions on the field this year. I will also point out too that in 2023 was when he really switched to like from a defensive player to primarily offense, and he was trying to be kind of that like tertiary cutter um, for the wind chill. This year he's still played more offense, but the split is way more even than it has been in the past couple seasons since he's become more of an offensive player. So that could also be a part of it. But yeah, just something interesting to watch. Like those matchups, he's a big component to this team's defensive and offensive systems.
I almost don't even consider like half the Minnesota roster. This is so unrelated to be an offensive or defensive player at this point.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
really like, I mean, there's so many good like almost even splits. I mean, yeah, obviously it's disparities, but I think Minnesota does a really good job of using our depth.
Yeah.
Anyway,
True. Good point. Okay, mailbag. I've been looking forward to mailbag all week. I've really liked the questions that I put out there. Um, we again got 3 responses, so thank you to the 3 people who responded. Um, I'm very grateful for those, especially since people, seem to like mailbag. Everyone always gives us good feedback, even if we don't get a ton of participation. The participation we do get is very valuable. I really appreciate it. So, like I said, we're going to go back to the strike a little bit here. The first question, we only got 1 response. We only got 1 response for either of the strike questions. So if you're participating in mailbag, you guys should come on, watch the strike, support your strike, answer the strike. We have 10 minutes, by the way. My question is, what is one big change the strike need to make for 2026? And this person said chemistry. We need strong leadership on and off the field. And my gut reaction is, yeah, absolutely. I think I said this earlier in the season. I think after game one, it felt like there was no leader on the field. It felt like maybe they were without a quarterback, they were without good, strong leadership on or off the field, and they seemed really disjointed. Obviously, at the end of the season, that changed, but it took 5 games for that to change. Well, maybe not five, but you know,
I
Yeah.
totally agree. I think it's one thing to have a lot of high level players, a lot of awesome talent, and it's another thing for that talent to all click together and for that talent to sort of build off of one another.
Mhm.
If players' chemistry isn't there, or if you have two players who are both very skilled, but neither one of them take a leadership role, or they both want to take a leadership role, that can, cause issues on the team. And I think that like having one or two or a few captains who are strong leaders is very important. Not to say that, strike captains aren't strong leaders, but I think we were seeing that sort of lack of on-field leadership. And I don't know how it translates to off-field. I'm not at their practices, I'm not in their meetings, but
Right? Yep.
I think I'm gonna step out broader. I was looking for a way to like articulate this. I think I just got it. I think taking a look back even or just a broader look, not only do the leaders need to step into their roles, I think just the team in general needs to next year come at it established as we were in this game against the Nightshade. I think it took us a few games to kind of figure out like, okay, who's playing what role. I think, like you said, Jay, there's a lot of talent on this team, and we knew that coming into the season. We knew it would kind of be a rebuild and an establishing season. And I think that we used that really effectively. The team, kind of found who's going to be the deep cutters, who's going to be the undercutters, uh, who's going to be QB1 on offense. I think the team did figure that out. It just took a little bit. And so, yeah, next year going into it, I think the leaders will have their established roles and everyone else can kind of fall into line after that and we'll get much more cohesive
And everyone just needs to come in with confidence, confidence in your role, confidence in your position on the team, and confidence in your leadership.
in the system too, just like trusting that
Mhm.
it'll play out.
My other question was, who is your strike MVP? Don't need to sit on this too much, I should say, because there's only one answer. Erica Bacon. Uh, I think I wholeheartedly agree. I think my gut reaction says yeah.
No argument here.
yeah, I think you put the wrong Steph on as an option. I think Steph Wood could make
Steph
you can
would too.
make a
There was
strong
an other
case.
option. There was an other option.
That's fair. I think you could make a strong case for Steph Wood. But I do think Erica Bacon super instrumental in a lot of those transitions and getting the discs down the field.
Yeah. Okay, this is not so the last question is going to be the one that I think will be. Oh no, sorry. I'll just keep going. Nearly halfway through the wind chill season, what are your reactions to the team, the division, and the league? First answer was the Atlanta win was huge and really fun to watch. I'm cautiously optimistic about our chance to win the championship again this year. I think this is the most integrity the league has ever had. The highlights and hard work is actually insane. And then finally, at this point, I have no idea what 4 teams will be at championship weekend.
Those are all great answers. Yeah. I think I want to highlight the second one. I think this is the most integrity the league has ever had. I think this is the most competitive it has ever been. The athletes are playing at a level they have never played at before. MVP is up in the air. Championship weekend's up in the air. It's a great season. It's a great season.
Yeah,
I
it's fun to
think,
watch every week.
yeah, I think there are, at this point, we were about halfway through the season. At this point of the season last year, I think there were at least 3 playoff locked teams. I
Same.
think this year there are 0. At this
Yeah,
point in the
probably.
season,
Yeah,
there are 0 playoff locked teams. So,
which is crazy. Yeah, but also that's how it should be because we're only halfway through the season.
no,
We have
I
five.
totally agree.
We have 5 minutes.
Oh, okay,
Um,
go, go, go.
Predictions for the wind chill at the Radicals game on Friday, June 13th. I'm hoping for a cleaner game with better offense. Wind chill win 23-18, 21-17 wind chill, and not going to be as close as they normally are. 2015 wind chill. Cool. And then, okay, this one I really liked. Any additional comments, questions, or takes you want to share? Chicago is looking really good, and I want to hear your thoughts after their win over Atlanta. Again, they won in overtime versus the Atlanta Hustle. I'm nervous Minnesota won't be able to make the Central Division this year. Um, my gut reaction again is I agree. I said Chicago looked good after the first game against the Wind Chill. Jay disagreed. We're not going to get into that debate right now because we don't have time. But I do truly think after what three games now, they do look good. Even if the games have been relatively close. I mean, their game against the Wind Chill wasn't. They're cohesive. They're strong. They're playing as a single unit. And yeah, I agree. They're the union that we knew as we came into the league a couple years ago.
Go ahead.
Honestly, I think part of me believes that the only way that the Wind Chill are going to take first in the Central is if they beat Chicago and also beat the Shred.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean that.
all I have to say. Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I was gonna say that hustle game was a huge padding. It gave them a little bit of an extra padding that they could maybe lose against the Shred. Like numerically, like statistically, they probably could take that L. But it was a huge win, also like just for morale, um, a good boost.
Hmm.
I mean, to take the division, Minnesota needs, if they lose against the Shred, Minnesota needs to beat Chicago by more than 4 points, and the Chicago need to lose another game.
They have to beat Chicago no matter what. And Chicago,
Yeah,
yeah, Chicago needs to start losing.
All I have to say, screw the union. Let's go chill.
probably travel anyway.
Probably travel.
No, but I do think the Chicago Union again, like we this isn't just a positive Minnesota wind chill podcast. Like they are a real threat this year, and we need
It,
to be on the watch. They have to beat Madison. They have to beat the Union. Union have to lose to somebody else.
it's
Again, even if we're not talking statistically, like that just has to happen if we want the dominoes to fall in our favor.
And
yeah,
not
it's
to,
definitely gonna be a Minnesota Chicago Central Division. It feels like it, and that's not.
Yep. Yep.
yeah, and not to like harp too much on the scheduling things, but Minnesota has a harder strength of schedule. Yes,
Yep.
they both played Atlanta, but Chicago played Atlanta on day two of that Atlanta weekend without Brett Holzmeyer, like
Yep.
without one of their best players. Um, Not only that, but Minnesota plays the Shred and Chicago plays Detroit a third time. So like we can sort of see the strength of schedule there.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
Chicago plays Detroit three times, whereas Minnesota plays the Shred.
Boo.
So
Mickey Mouse schedule.
that's what I
Yeah.
meant when I said Minnesota sort of needs to beat the Shred because
Yeah.
unless the Union are dropping a game to Madison and Minnesota, and even then, like it's tight. Like that's a tight window. So
Yeah. Okay.
who knows? Maybe
Well,
Detroit pulls off the upset of the century.
man, that'd be crazy. I would get a shirt so quick.
I absolutely
I would
100%.
drive. I would
I'd
drive
get the
to
69
Detroit.
jersey. I'd get the 69 jersey, bro.
All right. Well,
Stay chilly.
big game in Madison this upcoming Friday. If you're willing to make the drive, I absolutely recommend that you should. Thank you for everyone who participated in Mailbag. We're gonna have one probably in like 2 weeks. I think that cadence is works for my schedule, at least putting it all together and stuff. Um, and then after Madison, I should have had the schedule pulled up. I don't know what the Wind Chill are doing after that, but they probably are playing more frisbee. So we'll see you back at Seafoam Stadium, and yeah, and we'll see you next year for the strike season. Stay chilly and ka-chow.
Stay chilly.
Ciao. Stay chilly.
Ka-chow.